Hello and welcome to Maxgate. Maxgate is the home of Thomas Hardy. It's unique as a home for writers because Thomas Hardy took articles as an architect and worked as an architect for a number of years, and he designed and built Maxgate himself. Or rather, he designed it, he oversaw the building, and it was built by his brother, helped by his father, who were builders. His father actually said Hardy was the most difficult client he'd ever had. He was very clear about what he wanted. Thomas leased 1.5 acres of land from the Duchy of Cornwall, and it was this site that he decided to build his house. The first thing he did, it was a very open site. There were views for miles, but it was exposed and it was windy. So one of the first things he did was plant over 1,000 trees around the borders of the site. And the idea of that was to give him privacy and shelter from the winds. The trees thrived in the time he was here, but Thomas felt trees were living things. He didn't want them harmed, he didn't want them touched. And they actually became quite gloomy. And Florence, his second wife, wanted to cut some of them down to let more light into the site. But Hardy would have nothing to do with that. To him, it would be like cutting down a living creature. After he died in 1928, one of the first things Florence did was cut down many of the trees. Lillian and Gordon Gifford, Emma's niece and nephew, would stay with the Hardys in the holidays, and Gordon spent quite a lot of time here. They would have had a swing, they played croquet in the lawn and tennis, so it acted as an outdoor games room. In the corner here is a sarsen stone. Now, Hardy wouldn't have known this stone, but it is interesting and it links with the sarsen stone we will see further on in the garden that Hardy did know. So if we move across the games lawn, we will go to the woodland walk where Hardy walked every day. Emma and Thomas would walk this walk from the top to bottom every day. It was their daily constitutional. And after Emma's death, Thomas wrote about it. They'd done it for so long and for so many years. He could see the ghost of Emma, if you like, or the reflection of Emma in his memory, walking up and down this path. It's quite dark, but it has the trees and the wildness. And people ask why such a wild garden rather than a planted, neat garden. And that is because Thomas liked it like this. He liked the wild, he liked nature, he liked the naturalness of it. And when he was a boy, he walked 3 miles to school and 3 miles back across the country. And that was his world. It was where he did his thinking, it was where he got his inspiration. Another sarsen stone, but this one is Hardy sarsen stone, and he named it the Druid stone, and we refer to it as the Druid stone. It was found halfway between the house and the urn in the middle of the garden, which we'll see shortly. It took 7 men to lift it and place it here. The stone was the inspiration for one of his poems, again about Emma after Emma's death. It's called The Shadow on the Stone, and it goes, I went by the Druid stone that broods in the garden, white and alone, and I stopped and looked at the shifting shadows that at some moments fall thereon. From the tree hard by, a rhythmic swing, and they shaped my imagining to the shade that a well-known head and shoulder threw there when she went gardening. The urn is original to the house on this middle lawn, and it was between this urn and the house which you can see behind it, that the Druid stone was found. Every summer it was traditional for the Hardys to have a garden party. Emma loved entertaining, and Emma would serve scones and jam and what were known as her Mad Hatter sandwiches. I'm not quite sure what that means. Perhaps they were just great big sandwiches. But she loved dressing up and she loved hats, and she would float around with her hat, and she just enjoyed talking to people and seeing people here. She was in her element with that. To my left you can see the conservatory. Now the conservatory wasn't an original part of the building. The conservatory was added for Florence in 1920, I believe. And all the modernising of the house was done once Florence married Hardy. The house was extended in 1895, and you can see from the side how the extensions were done. There's a turret just above the conservatory which was added because the original house only had one turret on one side. So he added another turret to make the house look balanced. He added a kitchen, and the old kitchen was turned into the bicycle room. Now, in their 50s, Thomas and Emma took up cycling. Emma introduced Hardy to it, and they would travel all over the county. They would travel for miles. Emma's first bike was green, and she called it the Grasshopper, and she had a green riding suit made to match. Later, she got another bike, which was blue, and again, she got a riding habit to match her bike. And that was a good time for them, cycling, visiting new places, visiting people. In 1895, when Hardy did the extension, Emma asked him for a couple of rooms for herself. He built her 2 rooms in the attic, and one can just see one of the attic windows from here at the top of the roof. Emma referred to those rooms as her refuge and her solace. She spent time up there drawing, reading, writing, watching the birds from the window and the trees, because she would see the treetops. And she spent a lot of time up there. She did come down and have tea with Thomas at 4 o'clock, but they were estranged and didn't spend a lot of time together. Eventually, she died up there. She moved up to sleep in around 1901, something like that, and she died in 1912. One day Thomas was working in his study, and the maid came dashing down to him, telling him to come up to Emma, that she wasn't well. Thomas paused, told the maid to straighten her cap, went upstairs to Emma and saw how ill she was. He said to her, Em, don't you know me? But it was too late. Emma died shortly afterwards. A very sad end to a marriage which had lasted more than 35 years. When Hardy bought the land, a condition was that he built a 6-foot wall round the property, which he did. Hardy also put in this gate at the back. Hardy was a very private man. He hated being disturbed without him knowing someone was coming, without appointment. So what he did, from his study, if he could see people coming to the house and he wanted to avoid them, he'd scuttle down the stairs, across the lawn, through the little green gate, and the maid could then answer the door and say, quite honestly, Mr. Hardy is not at home. That's how he avoided unwelcome visitors. The palm I'm standing next to is supposed to have come from Florence's conservatory. It was a palm she grew in the conservatory, which grew too big and was planted out in the garden where it has thrived. Hardy liked simple food. A description from one person who had a meal at Maxgate called it coarse fare, suitable for a farmhouse. All that meant was things like a good apple pie. Hardy liked to grow his own vegetables, he liked his own fruit. He was very fond of eating strawberries by their handles. Didn't pull the ends up, he used the end and ate them with their handles on. He had gardener. He employed a cook, 2 maids and a gardener. And in around 1912, Bertie Stevenson, who was the gardener here then, told a tale about a hare getting into the garden and eating the lettuce, the greens. Hardy had said, leave it alone. It's a wild animal, you leave them, let them get on with it. Later on, people said, when asked what had happened to the hare, Bertie Stevens said, oh, I reckon a fox must have got it. But I think people reckon Bertie Stevens must have got it. If we look here at this brick in the wall, the brick has been put in the wrong way round. And the reason for that is the brick is etched with the Hardy & Co. name. It's the only evidence on the house that it was built by Hardy's brother and father. Behind me are the stones that commemorate the pets the Hardys had. In front is the stone to Wessex. Now Wessex was Florence's dog, which she brought with her to Maxgate. Hardy wasn't very keen at first, but grew to be very fond of Wessex. And Wessex was described as a very badly behaved dog. He would take food from the table, he was petted. The maids would have to dodge his nipping at their ankles. Behind Wessex stone are the stones to the cats. Emma loved her cats, and many of them came to a sticky end on the railway line, but she always had cats. On the right-hand tower is a sundial. Hardy designed the sundial, and on the sundial it says, "What of the night?" That's the translation of the Latin inscription. And when he took it to the sculptor asked him, why did he choose that saying? And Hardy replied, because joy comes in the morning. Coming up to the entrance of Maxgate is the path divides into 2, curves round and forms a heart shape. Why Hardy chose a heart shape, we're not sure. The heart of the home, a valentine to Emma, one can only speculate. One question we do get asked is why it's so overgrown. Why isn't it neatly and beautifully planted? And again, that goes back to Hardy, his preferences for the natural world, for wildness, for privacy. He didn't want a manicured garden. And welcome to Hardy's drawing room, also known as the music room. The room is interesting architecturally because of the window, which is a very large window for Victorian times and lets in lots of light. When the house was first built, there would have been 2 windows in the room, so there would have been another window at the opposite end of the room. That got blocked in once the extension was built. It's a beautifully proportioned room, and visitors coming into the house, it kind of brings out their memories of their grandmother, and they say they feel comfortable and at home here. The fireplace is original. It was designed by Hardy. The mirror is Venetian, and the tiles were brought by him from one of his holidays abroad. The tea table is also original, and the Hardys would sit round there, serve tea to their guests, or meet each other at 4 o'clock for tea in the house. Also called the music room because in here there was the piano, and Florence would play the piano, Hardy would play his violin, and music was very important to both of them. One little story relating to the piano is that one day, toward the end of her life, Emma was playing the piano. Hardy was dressed to go out, and he looked round the door, said goodbye, went out. 2 hours later, he came back, and Emma was still sitting there. She was playing the piano still. And she said to him, "I'm playing all the old tunes, all the music I know." And when she finished, she put the lid down on the piano and said, "I'll never play again." And 2 or 3 days later, she died. One of the favourite seats in this room is the chair with the screen. Screens were very common in those days. There was a big window, single paned, be quite cold, quite drafty, and Hardy was known for being quite thrifty, and the maids remembered him not allowing very big fires. So huddling up to a fire with a screen to protect you from the drafts was quite common then. It also gave privacy, comfort, and one could read in peace. But one of the things that I remember Hardy talking about was seeing Emma behind a screen on more than one occasion, with firelight behind her, with light behind her, seeing her silhouette and looking at that and dreaming about that and taking it off into his poetry. Perhaps she wasn't Emma at that point, perhaps she was just some sort of ethereal woman, but it really struck him, and he was very observant. Small things like that caught his attention. One of the interesting features in the room is the window. Hardy was a very private man, but he had his fans, he had people who were curious, and very much like modern day, people wanted to see where he lived. They'd come, they'd have charabanc tours, they'd walk up the path, they'd peer in the windows, and he hated it. What he did was he designed some shutters that would just pull up like that. I won't take them far up. And he could lift them just as far as he needed to, so people couldn't actually see in through the window, but he still had the light at the top. When he didn't need them up, they just slid back into place. And you have a windowsill. A very simple but very effective idea. Another feature of the room, and another Hardy designed, are the bookshelves. The bookshelves lift into the space at each side of the fire, and they lift out. So they're finely balanced. They're not fixed to the wall. They just actually finely balanced there. The bureau on the left is also an original piece of furniture. It was bequeathed to us by a family whose grandparent, I believe, had bought it at the time of the house sale. We don't know if this was the original position it was in, but it fits very well into the dining room. The chaise longue is significant. It's an original piece of furniture to Maxgate, and the link is to Tryphena Sparks. Now, Tryphena was Hardy's cousin, significantly younger than him, who grew up to be a very attractive young woman. Hardy knew her very well when she was young. And there was a lot of talk about possibly a romance between Tryphena and Thomas. Nothing ever proven, but enough talk to think there may have been an attraction. One of the things for Thomas, and I think one of the things that were difficult for the women in his life, was he did appreciate looking at women. He would probably either fall in love or have a crush quite easily. He could fantasize about women, and he saw in different women different things which were then adopted into his writing and into his heroines. And now we're sitting on the stairs going to where Hardy had his study on the first floor. He always had his studies on the first floor because it isolated him from the rest of the house and the world. So somewhere to explore, perhaps, visiting Maxgate. And I noticed just to the left of me is a portrait of Florence, T.E. Lawrence, who of course was a regular visit to Maxgate and very fond of Hardy, and Florence was a good friend of his. So there's a nice little trio, Hardy's Cottage, Maxgate and Clouds Hill, for you to visit and explore, and the stories are wonderful.